In the months leading up to Ifeyinwa's return, Ifatu's behavior in Ngwa had only worsened. She spent most of her days and nights with a rough crowd of village youth who had little to do. They would gather at a local palm wine joint, smoking cigarettes or even marijuana, drinking and exchanging crude jokes. Ifatu found some solace among them. No one there judged her for not having a degree or job. Many of them were in similar straits. With these friends, she could curse and brawl and be applauded for it. Over time, she even started participating in petty mischief around town, snatching roasted corn from a vendor and running off laughing, taunting younger kids on their way home from school, or scaring a widow's goat just for entertainment. Neighbors began to avoid crossing Ifatu's path. "That Onyeka's daughter has lost her way," they whispered. "Such a shame, when her twin is the pride of us all." These comments always got back to Nne Akudo, who would shed tears in private, wondering where they went wrong with Ifatu. For Ifatu, hearing the whispers only fueled her bitterness. If the villagers thought she was bad, then fine, she would be bad. At least it made her feel powerful in a world where she otherwise felt left behind. Sometimes late at night, Ifatu would creep home and overhear her parents murmuring prayers in their room. They prayed for her by name, asking God to guide their troubled child back to the right path. Ifatu, lying on her bed in the dark, would cover her ears. Those prayers tugged at a part of her she didn't want to acknowledge, the part that still yearned for her parents' approval and love. It was easier to pretend she didn't care. It was into this tense atmosphere that Ifeyinwa finally returned home, degree in hand and fiancé at her side. Early one bright morning, a car pulled up in front of the Onyeka family compound. It was Ekene's car. He had rented an SUV for the trip from the city. He stepped out first in a crisp shirt and jeans, tall and confident, yet with a respectful demeanor. He walked around to open the door for Ifeyinwa, who emerged, looking radiant in a simple green dress. "Papa, Mama," Ifeyinwa squealed, rushing forward as her parents came out to greet her. She hugged them tightly, all smiles and tears of happiness. "Welcome, welcome, my daughter," Mazi Onyeka boomed, holding her at arm's length to marvel at how she had grown into a young lady. Nne Akudo was crying openly, thanking God over and over for this reunion and blessing. They turned to Ekene and welcomed him warmly. He bent slightly in respect as he shook Mazi Onyeka's hand and accepted Nne Akudo's motherly hug. "You're welcome, my son," they said, making him feel at ease immediately with their kindness. Meanwhile, Ifatu lingered by the doorway, watching the scene with her arms crossed. Her sister looked even more beautiful than she remembered. Education and happiness had given her a special glow. Seeing Ifeyinwa's genuine tears of joy at being home and the pride shining on their parents' faces was like a knife twisting in Ifatu's guts. But she had resolved to play it cool, at least for now. She plastered on a natural expression as the group moved toward the house. Ifeyinwa finally noticed her standing there in the shadows of the doorway. For a split second, an uncertain silence passed between the twins. It had been years since they had seen each other in person. Since that day, one left in a flurry of anger and the other in a haze of pain. "Sister, I have missed you," Ifeyinwa said softly, stepping forward. She wasn't sure if a hug would be welcomed, so she hovered a moment, smiling hopefully. "Welcome back," Ifatu said simply, her tone hard to read. Perhaps noticing the tension, Nne Akudo gently nudged them. "Ifatu, come help your sister with her bag, mwam." she suggested, trying to encourage some interaction. Ifatu stepped out and took the heavy suitcase that Ekene had lifted from the car trunk. As she did, Ekene smiled and said, "Thank you, Ifatu. I've heard a lot about you." Ifatu raised an eyebrow. "I'm sure you have," she replied, not returning the smile. Ifeyinwa bit her lip but tried to keep the atmosphere light. "It's good to see you, sister," she offered again gently. Was all Ifatu managed as she carried the bag inside, avoiding her twins' eyes. For the rest of that day, things went relatively smoothly on the surface. The family sat down together to a special lunch. A plump chicken had been cooked with jollof rice to celebrate Ifeyinwa's graduation. As they ate, Mazi Onyeka peppered Ekene with friendly questions about his family, his job, and his intentions. Ekene spoke confidently but respectfully, stating that he hoped to marry Ifeyinwa within the next year, with the elders' blessings, and that he was building up his business and home to be ready for her. Mmeakudo all but glowed at his words, already picturing grandchildren and a secure future for her daughter. All the while, Ifatu mostly kept silent, only speaking when directly addressed. Outwardly, she seemed sullen but under control. Inside, however, jealousy was clawing at her heart like a wild animal. Hearing how wonderfully everything was going for her sister, academic honors, a loving fiancé with a prosperous future, it reinforced the narrative in Ifatu's mind that life was unfair. Each smile on Ifeyinwa's face and each proud question from her parents felt like a spotlight on Ifatu's own perceived failures. Later in the afternoon, as villagers dropped by to say welcome or share a kola nut in honor of Ekene's visit, Ifatu slipped away. She found refuge under the old guava tree in the back, the very spot where years ago she had made the fateful decision to send that email. She smoked a cigarette and brooded, half listening to the distant sounds of laughter from the front yard. Her childhood friend, Emeka, one of the trouble-prone youths who often hung around with, hopping over a low part of the fence and ambled toward her. "Why are you hiding back here?" Emeka teased, plucking a guava and biting into it. "I hear your doctor sister is home with her big man from Lagos." He said it playfully, but even that felt like mockery to Ifatu. "Go to hell, Emeka," she muttered, blowing smoke aside. Emeka raised his hands in surrender. "No vex, just joking." He peered toward the house. "So, are we still on for tonight?" Ifatu nodded softly. "Yes, meet at the schoolyard after dark," she said under her breath. Emeka grinned and slipped away the way he came, like a shadow. Unknown to the family, Ifatu had confided in a few of her gang about Ekene's day's visit. She painted Ekene as an arrogant city boy trying to steal her sister away, and she shared her bitterness with them. They, being loyal in their rough way, agreed to help her teach him a lesson, or at least scare him off. In truth, Ifatu herself hadn't decided exactly what to do. Her thoughts ranged from humiliating Emeka in front of Ifeyinwa to something more drastic like frightening him enough that he would leave and never return. In her jealous mind, anything that would derail her sister's perfect happiness was on the table. That evening, as twilight settled, Ifeyinwa found a moment to talk to her twin alone. The visitors had gone, and the men, Ekene and Mazi Onyeka, were outside inspecting the goat pen. While Neakudo washed up in the kitchen, Ifeyinwa cornered Ifatu in the small hallway by their bedroom. Ifeyinwa had to stand on tiptoe to quietly close the glass window near the hall, ensuring some privacy. She then spoke softly. "Sister, I know things have been difficult. I'm sorry I wasn't around. I always prayed for you, you know." "Prayed for me?" Ifatu replied with a short, harsh laugh. "Why? I'm not dead or sick." Ifeyinwa paused, gathering courage, then said, "I prayed that you would find happiness like I did. I know we haven't been close, but I want you to know I still care about you. At these words, something broke loose in Ifat. Perhaps it was the unconditional kindness, her sister's voice, or the weight of being back home with so many emotions swelling. Tears suddenly sprang to her eyes before she could stop them. She quickly turned away to hide them. In a voice barely above a whisper, she said, I I want to apologize. Ifeyinwa blinked, hardly believing what she heard. Her own eyes damped. Her kind heart immediately melted at this sign of remorse. Oh, sister, I forgive you. I've never held anything against you, she said, stepping forward to take Ifatu's hand. To Ifeyinwa's further astonishment, Ifatu went down on her knees, a traditional gesture of seeking forgiveness and showing humility. Please, forgive me for everything, she said, voice wavering as if emotional. I know, I know I've been difficult and said hurtful things. It's just I've been unhappy. But I don't want to ruin your visit. I'm really sorry. Ifeyiwa nearly burst into tears of relief. She pulled her sister up and into a tight hug. We can always start fresh, she whispered, crying softly onto Ifatu's shoulder. This means so much to me, Ifatu. Thank you. Outside the kitchen door, Neakudo had been walking by and witnessed this embrace, her own eyes filled with tears of joy. She hurried to tell her husband that, at last, maybe the rift was mending between their daughters. For the rest of that evening, the last of Ekene and Ifeyinwa's short stay before they planned to return to the city, the family relaxed in the compound. They lit a small fire, roasted corn and yam, and sat telling stories and jokes under the stars. Ifatu participated, quietly at first, but then actually contributed a funny memory from childhood, which surprised everyone. She seemed almost like her true self, the self she might have been without all the anger. As the night deepened, Nneakudo and Mazi Onyeka excused themselves to bed, giving the young people some space. Ekene and Ifeyinwa were sitting together on a wooden bench, whispering sweetly. Ifeatu lingered near the dying fire, watching them with her arms crossed. Her heart burned with envy to see her sister so content, leaning on her fiance's shoulder as they spoke about their future. Part of her had genuinely felt remorseful earlier, but that old bitterness was creeping back as she observed their affection. After a while, Ifatu approached them, her expression oddly warm. It's a lovely night, she said casually. Yes, it is, Ekene agreed, smiling. He was genuinely happy that his fiance's twins seemed to be warming up. Ifatu's earlier apology had relieved him as well, since he knew it meant a lot to Ifeyinwa. Ifatu sat down on a log opposite them. The firelight flickered over her face, which was calm and almost friendly. I was thinking, she began. Ekene hasn't really seen our village much beyond our compound and the main road. Perhaps I could show him around a bit. Just a short walk to enjoy the night air. What do you think, Ekene? Ekene, ever polite and also enjoying the peace of the countryside, nodded. That sounds nice, actually. Ifeyinwa looked up from Ekene's shoulder, a bit hesitant. She had only just gotten her sister back, in a sense, and still felt a tiny worry she couldn't name. But she also wanted to encourage this newfound goodwill between them. All right, she smiled, masking her unease. I will stay and tidy up here. You two go ahead and enjoy the walk. Are you sure? Ekene asked, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. Yes, go on. I will join you soon if I finish quickly, she replied. In her heart, she thought maybe this would be a chance for her twin and her fiancé to bond a bit without her there. A step forward, becoming real siblings. So with that, Ekene got up and followed Ifat out of the gate. Ifat led the way down the village path, which was lit faintly by the moon and dotted with fireflies. The sound of cricket and distant drums from a neighboring community's festival filled the warm night air. For a few minutes, they walked in silence. Ifat took him toward an area near the primary school, a spot where during the day children played soccer, but at night it was deserted and lined by bushes. Unknown to Ekene, she knew her friends would be waiting nearby, hidden in the shadows of the schoolyard grove. Ekene, trying to break the silence as they strode, said kindly, I'm really glad you and Ifeyinwa made up. It means a lot to her, and to me as well. Ifatu's jaw tightened for a second, but she forced a small nod. I guess it was overdue, she lied smoothly. They turned a corner by the dark schoolyard, and suddenly, figures emerged from the shadows. What? Ekene started, but he was cut off as three shapes lunged at him. In an instant, a cloth bag was thrown over his head from behind, while two others grabbed his arms. He shouted in alarm and tried to struggle, but strong hands held him fast. Keep quiet, one of the attackers hissed, pressing something sharp, a knife or a broken bottle, Ekene couldn't tell, against his side. In those chaotic seconds, Ifatu stepped back, her heart hammering. She hadn't physically grabbed him, but she stood as a lookout while her friends executed the plan. It was more violent than she had anticipated. Panic fled within her as she heard Ekene's muffled cries, but there was no turning back now. They dragged Ekene, who was strong and fought hard, into the bushes. One of the boys, Emeka, landed a hard blow to Ekene's stomach, knocking the wind out of him and finally subduing him enough to tie his wrist with a coarse rope. Please, take anything you want, Ekene gasped out, thinking it was robbery. We don't want your money, sneered Emeka. Though, in truth, they had considered robbing him too. Just shut up, or we will hurt you more. They hauled their captive to an old shed behind the school, which they had chosen as a temporary hideout. They shoved him inside, tying his legs for good measure, and left the bag loosely over his head so he couldn't easily identify them. In the darkness, heart pounding, Ekene realized this wasn't a simple mugging. It felt personal. But who in this village would target him, and why? Back at Onyeka compound, time ticked by, and neither Ekene nor Ifatu returned. Ifeyinwa had finished tidying and began to grow anxious. She walked to the gate, peering down the road. Nothing but darkness and distance, flickers, a lantern light. She tried calling Ekene's phone. It rang, but no answer. Now, real worry set in. Grabbing a flashlight, Ifeyinwa rushed to wake her parents. Within half an hour, Papa and Mama had roused a few neighbors, and midnight search began. Lanterns and flashlights bobbed through the village paths. They called Ekene's name and Ifatu's, their voices echoing. Ifeyinwa's heart thumped with dread, every horrible possibility running through her mind. She found it odd that both were missing. What could have happened to them together? Could they have been in an accident? Did they get lost? She tried not to imagine worse. It wasn't until early morning that there was any sign. As the first pale light of dawn broke, Ifatu walked back into the compound alone. Her clothes were smeared with dirt, and her face had a few scratches from branches in the bush. She looked tired but otherwise okay. The family, gathered in the yard in confusion and fear, turned as she entered. Where is Ekene? Ifeyinwa nearly screamed, running up to her sister. What happened? Where have you been? Ifatu quickly donned an act of exhaustion and nonchalance. She had spent the last few hours with her gang, deliberating on what to even do with Ekene. Eventually, fearing the situation would get out of hand, she instructed them to scare him a bit and then let him go on the nearest main road where it was safe, telling him never to return. Whether they had done so yet, she didn't know. Now, facing her family, she just wanted to deflect everything. He's gone, she said flatly, avoiding eye contact. Gone? Gone where? Back to the city? Mazi Onyeka asked, stepping forward with a stern, bewildered look. He left, back to the city, Ifatu answered with a shrug, then added in a mocking tone, he said he's no longer interested in her. A stunned silence made her words. Ifeyinwa shook her head. No, that's not true. You are lying. You have to be lying, Ifatu. Ifeyinwa's voice cracked, and tears of panic sprang to her eyes. She grabbed her sister's arm roughly. Where is Ekene? What did you do? Ifatu yanked her arm free, scolding. Get your hands off me. I told you what he said. He's gone, she repeated, her voice icy now. And he's not coming back. Ifeyinwa could hardly breathe. She fumbled for her phone and dialed Ekene's number again. This time it rang once and went to voicemail. Desperate, she scrolled through, find another contact and called Ekene's younger sister Dorcas in the city. When Dorcas answered, Ifeyinwa quickly asked, voice shaking, "Is Ekene there with you? Please, it's urgent." Dorcas, sounding confused and sleepy, replied, "He called late last night. He said he was coming back to Lagos immediately, but he didn't explain. He hasn't arrived yet, but I assume maybe he took a night bus or drove through the night. What happened?" Ifeyinwa's blood ran cold. "He left without even saying goodbye," she murmured to herself as a wave of hurt and bewilderment flooded her. Why would Ekene do that? It didn't make sense, unless what Ifatu said was true. But how could it be? Ekene loved her, or so she thought. Could something have happened on that walk? Her mind churned with questions and worst-case scenarios. "Thank you, Dorcas. I'll call you back," she managed and ended the call. Her parents were watching her anxiously. "What did she say?" Nneakudo asked quietly. Ifeyinwa swallowed hard. Dorcas said he phoned and told her he was returning to Lagos last night. He looked upset and she didn't know why. Mazi Onyeka frowned deeply, looking from Ifatu to Ifeyinwa. He sensed there was more here that met the eye, and the way Ifatu was standing there defiantly raised his suspicions again. "Ifatu," he said in a dangerous tone, "if you know what happened, you must tell us now." Ifatu folded her arms. "I have nothing more to say. He made his choice. Maybe he realized he didn't actually want a village wife." The cruelty in her words was barely disguised. Ifeyinwa let out a wail and fled into the house, unable to bear it. Nneakudo hurried after her, calling her name. Mazi Onyeka fixed a hard stare on Ifatu. "I don't believe this story for 1 second, he said, voice low. "You were with them. Did you quarrel with him? Did you chase him away, Ifatu? Or gini mere? Gini ki mere ya? What did you do to him?" Ifatu jotted her chin out. "Believe what you want, Papa. He's gone, and that's that." And with that, she brushed past him. Mazi Onyeka caught a whiff of cigarette smoke and something else. Was that alcohol? As she went by, it pained him deeply to see that his firstborn had become notorious. Shut his eyes and whispered a prayer under his breath. This family was being torn apart again, and he felt powerless. Inside the house, Ifeyinwa was sobbing on her bed. Nneakudo sat beside her, stroking her back. "Ndo, Nne, sorry my daughter. Please take heart," she murmured. "How can he live like that, Mama? Without even saying goodbye to me? It doesn't make sense." Ifeyinwa cried, her body shaking. "We were so happy just yesterday. What could have changed his mind overnight?" Nneakudo had no answers. She glanced up to see Ifatu standing in the doorway, looking on with an inscrutable expression. Anger fled in the mother's chest at the sight of her. "Are you satisfied now, Ifatu?" she said sharply. "Your sister is devastated. Is this what you wanted?" "Mama, I didn't," Ifatu began, but Ifeyinwa suddenly sat up, wiping her tears. "Leave, Ifatu," Ifeyinwa said, voice cold in a way she had never spoken before. The betrayal she felt was now mixing with a burning suspicion. "Just leave me alone." If Ifatu was stung by that, she didn't show it. She shrugged and left the front of the house. As she stepped out onto the porch, she saw her father by the gate, talking in low tones to a neighbor who had joined the search earlier. Word would spread soon that Ekene left, and tongues would wag. But Ifatu didn't care about gossip at this point. Let them talk. She walked away from the compound entirely, needing to put distance between herself and the scene of Ifeyinwa sobbing. She told her parents she was going to check something in the village, but really, she wandered aimlessly for a while, trying to sort out her own tumbling thoughts. There was an unexpected pang of guilt in her gut. Seeing the raw hurt on Ifeyinwa's face had not been as satisfying as she imagined. It actually made her stomach feel hollow. But then she remembered Ekene's arms around her twin, the look of bliss on Ifeyinwa's face earlier that night. The jealousy flared again, and she convinced herself it was better this way. She is better off without him. They all are. Ifatu argued internally. He would have taken her far away, and I can't let that happen. I won't let her win at everything. Toward afternoon, after Ifeyinwa had spent the day in despair and Ifatu was still nowhere to be seen at home, Ifeyinwa's phone chimed with a text message. It was from Dorcas in Lagos. With trembling hands, Ifeyinwa opened it, and what she read made her gasp. Ifeyinwa, I just spoke to my brother. Please don't be mad at him until you know what happened. He's not himself. He said your sister and her friends drugged him last night. Ifatu took advantage of him and recorded it. She then used the video to blackmail him into saying he didn't want you. He thought he had no choice. I'm so sorry. He didn't know what to do. He's in a mess right now. Ifeyinwa's eyes raced over the message again and again, as if trying to make sure she understood. Her hands began to shake violently. Mama! Papa! She screamed, her voice a mix of rage and anguish. Neakudo Amazi Onyeka rushed into the room, alarmed. What is it? What happened? Her mother asked, fearing some new tragedy. Ifeyinwa wordlessly thrust her phone toward them. Mazi Onyeka took it and read the text, his face contorting with shock and disgust. As the meaning sank in, Neakudo read over his shoulder, then clapped a hand over her mouth. Hell, Chime! She shouted. She drugged Ekene, blackmailed him, our Ifatu. Mazi Onyeka's voice was hollow. He felt sick. He had known Ifatu was troubled, angry, even cruel at times. But this level of malice was beyond anything he imagined. Ifeyinwa stood, wiping her eyes. Her sadness had transformed into a fierce resolve. We have to call the police, Papa. This is a crime. What she did to Ekene, what they did, it's criminal. And look what she did to me. Her voice broke, but she steadied it. I can't let this go. Mazi Onyeka slowly lowered himself into a chair, as if suddenly exhausted. His grey hair seemed grayer at that moment. Police? Our own daughter? He looked at his wife in agony. Neakudo knelt in front of Ifeyinwa, grabbing her hands. My child, Biko, think carefully. She's your sister. No matter what she has done, she's still our blood. If you involve the police, it will bring so much shame. It could ruin her life completely. Mama, Ifeyinwa said, her tone softening only slightly. She has ruined lives. Ekene could have died if things went wrong. He was hurt, and me. She tried to ruin my life too. How can you ask me to just overlook that? Neakudo burst into tears. What do you want us to do? Ifatu is not well. She's not thinking right. Prison will destroy her. I beg you. Don't do that to your twin. We can find another way. We'll make her apologize. We'll beg again for forgiveness. Please, Nwam, eh? Ifeyinwa looked to her father. He had buried his face in his palms. He was a proud man, and involving the authorities in family matters was anathema to him. She knew. Still, the betrayal was so great. A long tense silence hung in the air. Finally, Ifeyinwa spoke, voice trembling with conflicting emotions. I won't call the police yet, but if she dares harm Ekene or anyone again, I won't hold back. She took a shaky breath. Right now, I just want to hear it from her mouth. I need her to admit what she did. Mazi Onyeka lifted his head, eyes red. We will speak to her. I promise. But Ifeyinwa, promise me you won't do anything rash. Ifeyinwa's lips pressed into a thin line. That depends on her, she replied. The sun was setting when Ifatu finally returned home. She walked onto the compound with an almost brazen air. But inside she was nervous, bracing for confrontation. She could tell from the heavy silence that Dorcas must have spilled the truth. Coward, she thought of Ekene, running to his sister. Ifatu steeled herself. She wasn't going to show weakness now. Ifeyinwa was waiting in the yard, standing under the mango tree with her arms crossed. The remaining light of dusk outlined her figure. Their parent hovered on the veranda, tense and watchful. Ifatu took a deep breath and approached. Before she could speak, Ifeyinwa lunged forward. In the fading light, her eyes glinted with fury. "How could you?" she shouted, her voice echoing in the evening quiet. Ifatu feigned confusion. "What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about. Ekene told us everything. You drugged him. You forced yourself on him and recorded it." Ifeyinwa's voice shook with rage and disgust. Saying it aloud made her nearly gag. Never in her worst nightmares had she imagined her own sister capable of something so evil. Mazi Onyeka sucked in a breath and Neakudo started silently weeping on the porch, hearing it confirmed. Ifatu dropped any pretense of innocence. Her face hardened. "So what if I did?" she spat. "He's a grown man. He could have said no." Ifeyinwa's hand flew before she could realize it. Smack! She slapped Ifatu across the face. "You are vile," she hissed. "You tricked and hurt an innocent man who I love, and you tried to destroy me in the process. What kind of person does that, especially to her own twin?" Ifatu slowly turned her head back, a sting on her cheek fiery. A low hatred simmered in her eyes. "The kind you pushed to this," she screamed back. "You think it was easy living in your shadow? Watching you have everything fall into your lap while I got nothing but scoldings and failures? If I'm vile, you made me that way." "Ifeyinwa, Ifatu, stop this!" Mazi Onyeka shouted, stepping off the veranda. But it was too late. The sisters collided in a fury. Ifeyinwa lunged, grabbing at Ifatu's shirt. All the pain and betrayal of years burst out in her as she tried to rescue her sister. "I'm done forgiving you," she sobbed angrily. "You nearly ruined my life, Ifatu. Why do you hate me so much?" Ifatu grappled back, fingernails digging into Ifeyinwa's arms. "Because I do. I hate you. I hate you," she shrieked. All the jealousy, frustration, and self-looting she had harbored transformed into blind rage. She shoved Ifeyinwa, and the two fell to the ground, rolling in the dust as each tried to overpower the other. Years of suppressed conflict fueled them. Ifeyinwa, though the gentler one, fought with righteous anger now. She managed to pin Ifatu for a moment, grabbing her shoulders. "You're sick, Ifatu. You need help." Ifatu snarled and with a burst of strength reversed their positions, slamming Ifeyinwa's back against the ground and knocking the wind out of her. "Shut up!" Ifatu panted. She saw a small stone half buried in the dirt beside them, and without thinking she grabbed it. Her vision blurred with fury as she raised the stone high. Nakudo screamed from the porch, "Ifatu, no!" But Ifatu, in that red haze of anger, brought the stone down hard. It struck the side of Ifeyinwa's head with a sickening thud. Ifeyinwa's cry of pain was cut short. Her body went limp beneath Ifatu. The world seemed to stop. The stone fell from Ifatu's hand as she realized what she had done. Blood was trickling from a gash above Ifeyinwa's ear, mixing with the dust on the ground. Ifeyinwa's eyes were half open, but they stared at nothing, her chest rising and falling in faint, shallow breath. Mazi Onyeka and Nakudo rushed forward with a lantern. "Oh, merciful God!" Nakudo wailed, kneeling beside Ifeyinwa and cradling her bloody head. "My daughter! My daughter!" Mazi Onyeka was trembling as he bent down, putting two fingers on Ifeyinwa's neck. Her pulse, it faint but there. He looked up at Ifatu with an expression of utter horror. "What have you done, Ifatu?" he roared. Ifatu scrambled backward on her hands, shock overriding her anger now. She couldn't find her voice. Ifeyinwa's blood was on her hands, literally, and it dawned on her with chilling clarity. There was no time to lose. Mazi Onyeka gently scooped Ifeyinwa into his arms. "We have to get her to the hospital now." Nyakudo sobbing ran to fetch help from a neighbor with a car. As luck would have it, Ekene's rented SUV was still in their possession since he hadn't normally returned it yet. They bundled Ifeyinwa into the back seat. Mazi Onyeka shouting for Ekene, who had been skulking nearby in the dark, drawn by the noise, to come and drive since Mazi's hands were shaking too badly. All this while, Ifatu stood off to the side, trembling like a leaf. In the commotion, no one spoke to her further. Nakudo didn't even look at her as they raced to the car. Within minutes, the vehicle peeled out down the road, carrying her parents and unconscious sister away into the night, leaving Ifatu alone in the yard, illuminated by the dropped lantern's glow. She stood there, stunned as the dust settled. Her mind was a storm. What had she done? Had she killed her sister? That possibility jolted her out of paralysis. Ifeyinwa might die because of her. A keening sound rose from her throat and she clamped a hand over her mouth to stifle a scream. One thought now overrode all others. Run. She had to run. If her sister died, she could never face her parents or the village anymore. Even if Ifeyinwa lived, how could she explain any of this? The police would surely be called now. There was no hiding such violence. Heart pounding, Ifatu stumbled into the house. Her hands were shaking so badly. She struggled to open the metal safe where Mazi Onyeka kept some cash. She knew the combination, and in her desperation, it finally yielded. She grabbed a bundle of notes. Moments later, under the cover of darkness, Ifatu ran away from Ngwa, heading for one place she thought she could hide, Lagos. The city was a teeming mass where a single girl could disappear, and it was far from the reach of her village's immediate wrath. She also had one more twisted idea in mind. In Lagos was Ekene, the man who had defied her. Perhaps she could still salvage some revenge or force something out of this disaster. As the trees and familiar huts of Ngwa blood passed, Ifatu stared out of the window. Tears she didn't understand, grief, fear, regret streamed down her cheeks. It's all her fault, she whispered brokenly to herself. It's all Ifeyinwa's fault. If she hadn't been born, if I wasn't a twin, I wouldn't be like this. Yet, even as she said it, some part of her soul felt the lie. Each mile that increased the distance from her family drove the knife of guilt deeper into her heart. Back in Ngwa, the sun rose on a household in shambles. Neighbors learned of the tragedy and a few women gathered to pray in the Onyeka's yard. Ifeyinwa was alive, but barely. A small clinic in the nearest town had stabilized her and then directed the family to rush her to the teaching hospital in the city for better care. She was in coma, the doctor said, due to a severe head injury. Only time would tell if and when she might wake up. Mazi Onyeka stayed by Ifeyinwa's side at the hospital, holding her hand and whispering prayers, his tears falling freely. Nyakudo returned home to fetch supplies and was greeted by the emptiness of their compound, the silence of Ifatu's absence. She found the safe open and money missing. It didn't take much to piece together that Ifatu had run away. Despite everything, Nyakudo's heart ached anew. One daughter lay at death's door. The other had likely fled in fear and disgrace. She knelt on the floor of the bedroom, clutching Ifeyinwa's pillow to her chest and wailed, pouring out every ounce of sorrow, regret and desperate hope that somehow this nightmare would end. Days turned into weeks. Ifeyinwa remained in a coma, her fragile body connected to IV drips and monitors. Ekene, upon hearing of her condition, was devastated. He had been dealing with his own turmoil in Lagos. After escaping Ifatu's gang, they eventually dumped him, bruised but alive, on the outskirts of town where he managed to get help. He had gone straight home and confided in Dorcas. Enraged, Dorcas had insisted he inform Ifeyinwa, which he did through that text, only to later learn Ifeyinwa was now fighting for her life because of a confrontation with her sister. Ekene traveled back to the region as soon as he could, torn by guilt and grief. He visited the hospital daily, bringing flowers that remained unacknowledged. on the bedside table, speaking softly to Ifewa about the future he still prayed they would have, begging her to come back to them. A month later, Ifatu's flight to Lagos did not bring her the freedom she expected. She decided to visit Ekene's upscale duplex apartment, having found the address in Ekene's car at the village. Like a spectre in the night, when Ekene opened his door, thinking perhaps his sister had forgotten something, he recoiled in shock and anger at the sight of Ifatu. She looked disheveled, eyes bloodshot as she pushed her way inside. "What are you doing here?" Ekene backed, instinctively stepping back. This was the woman who had drugged and violated him. He felt a surge of nausea just being near her. Ifatu tried to steady her voice. "Ekene, please, I need help," she said, attempting a pitiable expression. "If anyone attacked me and I had to run, I'm pregnant," she lied desperately, the falsehood coming to her in a flash. "That night, you and I'm carrying your child." Ekene's jaw dropped in utter disbelief and disgust. "You're out of your mind," he growled. "Get out before I throw you out." But Ifatu doubled down, pulling out her phone. "I still have the video. If you don't accept me and this baby, I will tell the police you raped me. Who do you think they will believe? I have proof. We did it. And I will say you drugged me." Her eyes were wild, the look of someone clutching at any means to survive. Ekene's hands curled into fists. He had never hit a woman in his life. But at that moment, it took everything in him not to. "You are deranged," he whispered. "You ruined your sister's life. You nearly destroyed mine. And now you want what? Marriage?" He advanced on her, and for the first time, Ifatu felt true fear toward him. "Marry me. Give my baby a name," she stammered, backing up. Or I will press charges. I already did." It was a bluff. She hadn't yet. But Ekene didn't know that. In fact, Ekene's neighbor had already called the police quietly when he heard shouting. Within minutes, 2 officers arrived at the door, responding to what they thought was a domestic disturbance. When they saw a distraught woman and an angry man, they separated them to ask questions. "She's lying, officer," Ekene said firmly after Ifatu dramatically wailed that he had impregnated her and refused to marry her, and that he had even assaulted her. "My name is Ekene Obi. I have never touched this woman willingly. In fact, I want to report her for assault and blackmail." He then recounted with remarkable composure how Ifatu had orchestrated his kidnapping and drugging, and how she was now inventing a pregnancy to extort him. At first, the officers were wary. Such claims and counterclaims were tricky, but Ekene was well spoken, clearly educated, and when Dorcas, who had been in the next room, came forward with text messages, evidence, and explanations, the truth of the bizarre started to crystallize. Ifatu, seeing the tide turn, made a break for the door, but a third officer called in as things escalated, caught her before she could escape. They confiscated her phone, on which they indeed found the incriminating video of Ekene in a semi-conscious state, with Ifatu posing the scene. This, combined with Ekene's statements and messages Dorcas provided, painted a damning picture of Ifatu's actions. Within a day, charges were filed against Ifatu for assault, sexual assault, blackmail, and making false statements to police, and she had indeed by then tried to claim rape. Her family, informed through some relatives in Lagos, refused to come to her aid. They were drowning in their own crisis with Ifewa. Besides, Mazi Onyeka flatly couldn't bring himself to defend Ifatu this time. Realizing she was utterly alone, Ifatu finally broke down during interrogation. Perhaps it was the weight of all her deeds finally crushing her spirit, or perhaps a sliver of conscience cutting through. She confessed to everything. She admitted she had never been pregnant, that she lied about Ekene raping her, that she had arranged the kidnapping and seduced him under duress. The legal process moved forward, and Ifatu was remanded in custody awaiting trial. As she sat in a bleak cell day after day, all she could think about was Ifewa. She peppered the few visitors she had, a court-appointed lawyer mostly, with anxious questions. Is my sister alive? Did she wake up? When word finally came that Ifewa was still in a coma, Ifatu felt a strange mix of relief and frustration. Relieved that she hadn't killed her, but frustrated that Ifeyinwa hadn't disappeared either. In that moment, she even thought, if she never wakes, maybe everyone will forget and I won't look like the monster in comparison. Such was the twisted state of her mind. Months passed. Ifeyinwa remained unconscious in the hospital, though doctors noted small signs that her brain activity was encouraging. Ekene visited daily when he could, as did her parents. Dorcas came often too. She had become good friends with Ifeyinwa over the shared audio, and she kept vigil with Ekene, sometimes even bringing a laptop to the hospital room so they could play Ifeyinwa's favorite gospel music, hoping the sound might coax her back. Mazi Onyeka and Nene Akudo took turns going home to keep the house running, but life had lost its color for them. They spoke little, prayed much, and aged years in a matter of weeks. And Ifatu, she awaited her sentencing. Having pled guilty to multiple charges, the day of reckoning came in a small Lagos courtroom. She stood thinner than before, her once fierce eyes now dull. When asked if she had anything to say, she simply shook her head. There was nothing left to say. She was sentenced to several years in prison for her crimes. The video evidence and her confession made it a straightforward case. As the judge finalized the sentence, Ifatu murmured under her breath, "I will finish what I started if I ever get out." It was just loud enough for the policeman beside her to hear, who frowned in pity or perhaps fear for her soul. In that moment, Ifatu didn't care about the law or even about herself. All she cared about was that Ifeyinwa, according to the last update she had, was still alive. That thought boiled in her blood every day as she lay on her thin prison mattress. If she lives, I will make her pay for everything. It was irrational, twisted logic, but hate was all Ifatu had left to hold on to. Nearly 5 months after the fateful night, a quiet miracle happened. Ekene was sitting by Ifeyinwa's hospital bed one cool afternoon, gently reading aloud from one of her favorite books, when he felt a faint pressure on his head. He stopped, thinking he imagined it, but then it came again. His eyes darted to Ifeyinwa's face, her eyelid fluttered. "Doctor! Nurse!" he shouted, his heart pounding with hope and disbelief. By the time Mazi Onyeka, who had been napping in a chair, jerked awake and Nene Akudo rushed in from the corridor, Ifeyinwa's eyes were open, unfocused at first, but undeniably open. "Ify, my love, can you hear me?" Ekene said, kneeling by her. Ifeyinwa's gaze slowly moved, as if adjusting to light after a long darkness. Her throat was too dry to speak, but her lips parted. She saw Ekene's face, her father's starry eyes, her mother's sobbing grin behind him. A single tear rolled down Ifeyinwa's cheek. She managed the faintest nod. A cry of joy rang out in the hospital ward. Nene Akudo nearly collapsed to her knees, thanking God. Mazi Onyeka was shouting praises to heaven between laughter and tears. Ekene pressed Ifeyinwa's hand to his forehead, weeping openly. Over the next hours, doctors examined Ifeyinwa and confirmed the miraculous. She had emerged from the coma with her cognitive faculties intact, though weak and disoriented. It would take time and therapy for her to fully recover physically, but they expected a good prognosis. It felt as though the entire world that had been holding its breath for months finally exhaled. Ifeyinwa's first quiet words, once given water, were "Mama, Papa," assuring her parents she knew them. Then, looking at Ekene's very hopeful face, she whispered, "Ekene, you came back. I'm here, I'm here." He choked out, bringing her hand to his lips. "I will never leave you again." In the flurry of relief and overwhelming emotion, the subject of Ifatu did not come up immediately, but a few days later, as Ifeyinwa gained strength, the truth could not be avoided. She awoke from confused dreams one morning and asked in a trembling voice, "Where is Ifatu?" A heavy silence filled the hospital room. Mazi Onyeka cleared his throat. Gently, he explained to Ifeyinwa all that had transpired after she was hurt, that Ifatu had run away, that she had been arrested in Lagos, that she had been sentenced and was in prison. He spared some of the worst details, but Ifeyinwa, listening with tears spilling, understood enough. "She's alive then?" Ifeyinwa said softly. It wasn't a question so much as a realization. Her twin was alive but locked away, her life essentially ruined. Even Ekene interjected tenderly, I know it's hard to hear, but she made her choices, love. None of this was your fault. Ifeyinwa nodded weakly, though her heart ached. It was hard to reconcile the little sister she once adored with the criminal being described. With her characteristic resilience, Ifeyinwa focused on healing. Ekene stayed by her side through her rehabilitation, helping her relearn how to walk steadily, eat solid foods, rebuild her strength. Her graduation and job plans had been derailed by the coma, but new opportunities eventually presented themselves. One of her professors arranged for her to join a research project once she was ready, giving her something positive to look forward to. A few months after Ifeyinwa awoke, once she was well enough to travel short distances, Ekene proposed to her again properly, this time at a hospital garden where he had first taken her to a walk during recovery. On bent knee, with her parents and Dorcas as witnesses, he asked her to marry him, promising to cherish her forever and leave the past behind. Ifeyinwa, tears of joy in her eyes, said yes without hesitation. They decided not to wait too long. Life is too unpredictable to delay happiness, Ifeyinwa said. A small wedding was planned in Ifeyinwa's hometown church once she was fully recovered. It was a bright, bittersweet day. Ifeyinwa looked radiant in her ivory lace gown, Ekene dashing in his suit. Mazi Onyeka walked his daughter down the aisle with pride, and Inakudo was practically glowing with motherly joy. Yet, an undercurrent of sorrow touched their hearts. There was an empty seat where Ifatu, as the twin sister, would have been. Mazi Onyeka had made the decision not to tell Ifatu about the wedding. She was only months into her prison term, and given her last words and state of mind, they worried any contact could stir trouble. Still, as a small nod to her sister, Ifeyinwa carried a single tiger lily in her bouquet, Ifatu's favorite flower when they were kids, a detail no one else knew about her. After the vows were exchanged and the couple were pronounced husband and wife, a new chapter truly began for Ifeyinwa. She moved with Ekene to the city of Lagos, where together they worked on growing Ekene's tech business, and Ifeyinwa later took up a role in research lab as planned. They built a home filled with love and mutual respect. Over time, laughter returned easily to Ifeyinwa's life, yet the shadow of her twin sister's fate was something she never completely forgot. 5 years passed in what felt like the blink of an eye. Ifeyinwa and Ekene's marriage was a happy and fruitful one. They are settled in a pleasant suburb on the outskirts of Lagos, balancing the hustle of the city with a calm home life. The years brought 2 beautiful children. Their first child, a daughter named Maya, was now 4 years old, bright, inquisitive, and already showing a spark of her mother's gentleness and her father's confidence. Their second, a boy named Daniel, had just turned 2, boisterous and always trailing after his big sister. Ifeyinwa poured her love into her family. She often marveled at how life had transformed. From the quiet village girl who feared her own twin, she had grown into a confident woman, a mother, and a respected professional each night. She and Ekene would check on their sleeping children and whisper thanks for the peace they had earned. However, peace in life is sometimes like the eye of a storm, calm but surrounded by brewing trouble. Unknown to Ifeyinwa and Ekene, the storms of Ifatu's hatred had not passed. It had merely been delayed. Ifatu's prison term had not been for life. She was young and it was her first major conviction, so she received a term of several years with a decent behavior and a bit of overcrowding in the prisons. She ended up serving 4 years before being released. During her term behind bar, Ifatu had become both harder and more hollow. She rarely spoke to the prison counselors, ignored any religious volunteers who tried to reach out, and instead fell in with a group of bitter inmates who reinforced her anger. She never once accepted a visit from her parents. Only one letter had come from her mother begging her to reflect and promising prayers. Ifatu burned it without reading past the first line. Upon release, Ifatu found herself virtually alone in the world. She certainly could not return to Ungwa. She doubted she would be welcomed even by old friends, and she had no desire to see the pity or disgust in people's eyes. Lagos, vast and anonymous, offered a better hiding place. Using some survival skills she had picked up, she connected with a couple of unsavory acquaintances from prison and found a spot in a crumbling tenement in a rough part of town. Work was scarce for someone with her record and lack of skills. Ifatu soon fell back on what she knew: intimidation and bad company. She became involved with a street gang that engaged in various petty crimes: extortion from market traders, acting as enforcers in tough disputes, and occasionally, when desperation demanded, kidnapping for ransom. In the back of her mind, like a drumbeat that never stopped, was Ifewa. Over the years, through the grapevine of mutual contact and a bit of clandestine snooping, Ifatu had learned of her sister's recovery and marriage. She even discovered their Lagos address one day, trailing Dorcas from a distance after recognizing her by chance in the city. From a street corner, she had watched Dorcas drop off gifts at a cheerful-looking house, and seen from afar the pregnant Ifewa came to the gate to hug her friend. That sight had nearly driven Ifatu mad with envy. The glowing joy on Ifewa's face, the obvious prosperity of her life with Ekene. Ifatu wanted to storm in and smash that happiness to bits, but she held back, biding her time. She was not ready yet. She needed a plan that wouldn't land her straight back in prison. That plan materialized when one of her gang associates, a very man nicknamed Razor, grumbled about needing a big score, something that could make him rich and maybe allow them to disappear somewhere far. He was tired of the small cones and fights. Ifatu, eyes glinting, proposed an idea. "I know of a wealthy man, and I know his weakness." She meant Ekene, of course. His weakness was his love for her sister. At first, Razor and the others were skeptical. Kidnapping was a risky business. People had been caught and executed for it in some states, but Ifatu was persuasive. She painted a scenario of quick in and out, grab Ekene's young child. She had gleaned from gossip that they had a daughter and a baby son. Demand an exorbitant ransom from the doting father, get the money and release the kid unharmed. He can afford it, she insisted, and he will pay, trust me. The gang eventually agreed. A rich man's child was the ultimate leverage, and with Ifatu providing intel and inside knowledge, it seemed foolproof enough. So, one warm afternoon, Ifatu found herself lurking in the shadows near Little Stars International School, the preschool that 4-year-old Maya attended. She had observed the routines for a week, the drop-off and pick-up times. The fact that sometimes Ekene himself came, but often it was a driver or nanny. On the chosen day, Ifatu had two accomplices waiting in a van down the street. When Maya's nanny arrived on foot, holding the girl's hand, they lived close enough that sometimes they walked. One of the men staged a distraction, falling off a bike in front of them. As the nanny paused, concerned, Ifatu approached from behind and swiftly pressed a chloroform-soaked cloth over the woman's nose. She slumped within seconds, and before little Maya could scream, Razor scooped the child up. Maya barely had time for one muffled cry before they bundled her into the van and sped off. It was a bold abduction, and though one witness caught sight of the commotion from afar and raised alarm, the van was already gone in the frenetic Lagos traffic. That evening, Ifewa and Ekene's world came crashing down. The nanny, still grudgy and ashamed, sobbed as she recounted to the police how a man fell and then a woman she couldn't remember clearly, only an impression. A tough-looking woman about mid or late 20s with short cropped hair. Ifewa's heart froze. Could it be? No, she told herself. Ifatu didn't know where they lived, did she? The kidnappers struck quickly with their demands. Ekene's phone buzzed that night with a text from an unknown number. "We have your daughter, 100 million naira, or you will never see her again. Don't call police or she dies." Ekene's hands shook as she showed the message to Ifewa and the police officers already stationed in their living room, taking a report. 100 million naira. It was a huge sum, more than even they could gather quickly. It didn't matter. She would pay anything, but the threat against contacting police was moot. The police were already involved. In fact, a special anti-kidnapping unit had quietly joined them, advising Ekene to play along and not reveal police presence. Ifewa was nearly out of her mind with terror for Maya, their sweet, smart little girl, whose laugh filled their home each day, was in the hands of criminals. She clung to Ekene, tears streaming silently, as he assured the kidnappers via text that he would comply and needed instructions. Ifatu, on the other end of that clandestine phone, smirked at his immediate willingness. Of course you will, Ekene, she thought. You have something to lose. The plan was to get him to drop off a duffel bag of cash on the outskirts of the city in 2 days. They chose a construction site as the spot. During those 2 days, Ifatu stayed in a rented one-room shack with Maya. The little girl was surprisingly calm after the initial fright, perhaps too young to grasp the danger fully. Ifatu tried not to interact more than necessary, but one evening as she was eating, Maya piped up softly, "Auntie, can I have some bread, please? I'm hungry." That polite, trusting voice almost made Ifatu falter. She tossed a piece of bread to the child and growled, "Be quiet." But afterward, she couldn't shake the feeling of those innocent eyes on her. Maya had her mother's eyes. The ransom drop was set for midnight at the abandoned site. Ekene insisted on going alone as instructed, but unknown to the kidnappers, plainclothes police officers trailed at a safe distance with a wider perimeter team ready for intervention. Ekene drove off and exited his car, a heavy duffel in hand, calling out into the darkness, "I have what you asked for. I'm placing it here." His voice echoed in the skeletal structure of what would have been an office building. From behind a concrete pillar, Razor stepped out with a pistol, while Ifatu hung back in the shadows, mask over her face. "Where are you, my daughter?" Ekene demanded, trying to keep his voice steady. "She's safe for now," Razor said. "Put the bag down and back away." Ekene sat the duffel on the ground, its weight landing with a thud. It was filled mostly with placeholder papers and some real cash on top. The police idea to lure the kidnappers in. He raised his hands and backed off a few paces. "Please, show me she's okay," he pleaded. At a signal, one of the gang members brought little Maya forward into the open, a tiny figure clutching a teddy bear they had given her. Ekene's heart nearly burst seeing her. "Daddy!" she cried out and tried to run to him. That was the breaking point. From all sides, dark-clad figures of the anti-kidnapping unit swarmed in. "Police, drop your weapon," a voice shouted. Chaos erupted. Razor fired a shot in panic, grazing a wall. In the commotion, Ifatu, realizing the plan was foiled, grabbed Maya by the arm and started dragging her back towards the van, which was parked nearby, with its engine running and driver ready. But before Ifatu could reach it, a policeman stepped into her path, gun trained on her. "Stop right there. Release the child." Ifatu halted, eyes darting. She was surrounded. Maya whimpered, "Auntie, you are hurting me." As Ifatu's grip tightened in desperation, seeing no escape, Ifatu actually lifted the child and held her in rough embrace, almost like a shield. Ekene broke from the officers and ran towards them. "Ifatu!" he roared, recognizing her despite the mask, perhaps by her stance, or maybe he just knew. "If you want to blame someone, blame me, not an innocent child. Let her go." Hearing her name confirmed by Ekene, the police moved carefully. "So it's a family matter," one murmured to another. They had suspected as much from Ifeyiwa's story. For a moment, time froze as Ifatu's gaze met Ekene's across the distance. Then Ifatu's eyes flickered to the small face pressed against her. Something perhaps human in her relented, and she set Maya down. The child stumbled and immediately ran as fast as her little legs could carry her straight into her father's arms, crying. At that, Ifatu simply raised her hands in surrender. Two officers rushed in and tackled her to the ground, cuffing her in seconds. She didn't resist. It was over. The days that followed, Maya was declared safe and unharmed, much to Ifeyinwa's unspeakable relief. When the police formally presented the kidnappers in custody, Ifeyinwa and Ekene attended the briefing. Ifeyinwa's face went white as chalk when she saw Ifatu looking tired, defiant, and utterly unrepentant. Ifatu in turn locked eyes with her twin one last time. There was no apology there, no remorse, only hatred as she led away. The legal outcome was swift, giving Ifatu's prior record and the severity of kidnapping a minor for ransom, capital offense in many jurisdictions. The judge made an example of her. She was sentenced to life imprisonment. Her accomplices received heavy sentences as well. When the dust settled, Ifeyinwa felt a strange mix of emotions, profound sorrow that her own sister had gone so far astray, and an overwhelming gratitude that her daughter was back safe. The villagers in Ongwa heard of the tale through the grapevine with heavy hearts. What a tragedy, they said, that twin daughters of a decent family could end up, one a hero mother and the other a villain in jail. Some chalked it up to say destiny, chi, or old generational curses. Others simply shook their heads. A week after the sentencing, Ifeyinwa decided to do something that both her parents advised her against. She wanted to visit Ifatu in prison. What good will it do? Mazionika asked gently. Haven't we all been through enough? But Ifeyinwa's heart needed closure. She needed to know why. Why her sister's love had soared to such hate. So one grey morning, Ifeyinwa found herself sitting on one side of a thick glass partition, a phone receiver pressed to her ear waiting. On the other side, escorted by a guard, Ifatu shuffled in wearing prison garb. She sat and picked up the other phone, eyeing her twin through the glass. For a long moment, neither spoke. Ifeyinwa couldn't help it. Tears filled her eyes as she beheld the sister she had grown up with. Now, so hardened and gaunt. Ifatu, she began, voice quivering. Why? Ifatu leaned forward, and in her eyes burned that familiar fire of resentment. Why? She repeated, voice dripping venom. You want to know why I hate you? Ifeyinwa's breath caught. She nodded slowly. Ifatu's lips twisted in a snare. Because you took everything. Everything, Ifeyinwa. From the moment we were born, you were the favorite. Don't try to deny it. She snapped when Ifeyinwa opened her mouth to protest. Papa and Mama adored you. The village adored you. You got the brains, the looks, the praise. And what did I get? Scoldings, disappointment. I was always second. No, I was nothing. That's not true, Ifeyinwa said softly. You choose. I choose nothing. Ifatu sneered, banging her free hand on the counter on her side. The guard cast a warning look, but she continued. I tried to be one person. I tried to be my own person, and all I got was compared to you, or told to be more like you. You. Her eyes gleamed with unshed tears of fury. I was never enough, and you barely even defended me. You just kept shining like it wasn't killing me. Ifeyinwa started to cry. Sister, I never wanted you to feel that way. I loved you. I looked up to you. I always hoped we would succeed together. I tried to help. Your help was pity. Ifatu spat. Save your tears, Ifeyinwa. I don't need them. Look at you, still perfect even now. Sitting there with your expensive blouse and your crocodile tears, with a husband and children waiting for you at home. What do I have? Chains and a cell. A heavy silence fell. Ifeyinwa trembled, trying to find words. Ifatu, I'm so sorry for everything. I never ever meant for our lives to turn out like this. Ifatu stared at her, that hatred still smoldering. But behind it, perhaps a deep unspoken pain. It doesn't matter what you meant, she replied hoarsely. This is how it is. Some of us are born to lose. They sat in silence for a moment, then gulf between them filled with tears of pain. Finally, Ifeyinwa wiped her tears. I needed to see you, to hear it from you. I wish... Her voice broke. I wish things could have been different. I pray for you, sister. I still do. Maybe one day you will find peace. Ifatu looked almost startled for an instant, as if the notion of someone praying for her was foreign. Then her face hardened again. She slowly hung up the receiver without another word and stood up. Before the guard led her away, Ifatu mounted something through the glass. Ifewa was not sure, but it looks like "I hate you," a final verdict between them. Ifewa left the prison with a heavy heart. Outside, Ekene was waiting by the car with open arms. She fell into them, sobbing quietly. "It went as I expected?" he asked gently. Ifewa nodded against his chest. "She still hates me. Nothing I said reached her." They drove back to their home, where Neakudo was watching little Maya and baby Daniel. That evening, after the children were put to bed, Maya had been extra clingy since returning, and Ifewa stayed by her until she fell asleep. Ifewa and her parents sat on the living room couch. Ifewa recounted the conversation with Ifatu. Mazi Onyeka closed his eyes in sorrow, while Neakudo wept softly. "I have lost one daughter," Neakudo said, shaking her head. "But thank God I did not lose both." She reached over and held Ifewa's hand with one of hers and Ekene's with the other. "We must focus on what we have." Ifatu made her own choice. We can only pray for her soul now. Mazi Onyeka, eyes glistening, added, "Not a day will go by that I won't regret how things turned out. Perhaps I was too harsh on her at times. Or maybe we didn't see how deeply she was hurting. I don't know." Ifewa pressed her head to her father's shoulder. "Papa, don't blame yourself. We all tried. Some hearts can't be healed by others unless they want to heal." In the following days, life gradually found its new normal. The trauma of the kidnapping left some scars. Maya had nightmares for a while. Ifewa startled easily if she couldn't see the children playing in the yard for even a second. But with love and support, the family grew strong again. Ekene's business thrived. Ifewa went back to her research part-time and even started considering writing a memoir about her experiences, hoping it might help someone else. As for Ngwa village, Mazi Onyeka and Neakudo returned to a quieter life there once Ifewa was well settled again. They aged considerably from the stress, but found comfort in their community and grandchildren's visits. Ifatu became a hushed cautionary tale, the once fairly child of the lion, whose own rage consumed her. Occasionally, news filtered to the family that she was causing trouble, even in prison, getting into fights, earning herself solitary confinement stint. It seemed she remained unrepentant and angry at the world. Yet, Ifewa could not fully extinguish her hope. She often found herself whispering a prayer for Ifatu at night. After checking on Maya and Daniel, "Wherever she is, God, please touch her heart. Let her find some light in that darkness." She would pray silently, even if reason told her it was unlikely. One bright morning, as Ifewa watched her children chase each other around the yard, she realized something. The cycle of hatred and jealousy ended with her. She would raise her children to love each other, to never feel in competition the way her sister had. She would fill her home with so much warmth that no shadow could take root. In her heart, Ifewa forgave Ifatu. It wasn't easy. There were days she still felt pangs of hurt and anger, but she chose to forgive because that was the only way she herself could truly be free of the past. She sent a letter to the prison chaplain once, asking if he could pass a message to her sister. "I forgive you. I love you. I pray for you." She never knew if Ifatu received it. There was no reply, but that was alright. The act of offering grace was as much for Ifewa's peace as for Ifatu's. And so life went on. Ifewa and Ekene built a beautiful life together, one filled with compassion, understanding, and resilience. Their children grew in a home that valued empathy and open communication above all. As for Ifatu, the years in prison stretched out before her. Perhaps one day remorse would come, perhaps not. But if it ever did, Ifewa's door and heart would be open for her. Until that day, all Ifewa could do was live her own life as fully and kindly as possible, cherishing the family she had and remembering the sister she lost to the darkness. Every so often, on quiet evenings, Ifewa would step outside and gaze at the stars, thinking of the old times when two little girls once listening to folktales under the sky. In her heart, she spoke to her twin. I hope you find peace wherever you are, sister. And in that silent wish was all the love that remained. The unbroken bond of twins that despite every terrible thing, even hatred, could never fully sever. The end. Moral lesson of this story. Jealousy can destroy a person's life. Ifatu was jealous of her twin sister, and that jealousy made her do many bad things. At the end, it ruined her own life. Good character is more important than beauty or talent. Ifeyinwa was kind, respectful, and hardworking. That is why she succeeded and was loved by people. Parents should not ignore bad behavior. Even though Mazi Onyeka and Nne Akudo tried to correct Ifatu, they allowed some things because she was family. This allowed her to become more dangerous. Evil plans don't end well. Every evil thing Ifatu did came back to hurt her. Evil may win for a short time, but in the end, it always fails. Forgiveness brings peace, but wisdom protects you. Ifeyinwa forgave her sister many times, but she also learned to be careful. Forgiving someone doesn't mean you should allow them to hurt you again. Hard work and patience pay off. Ifeyinwa worked hard, even in the face of pain. In the end, she found success, love, and peace. Bad friends can destroy your life. The friends Ifatu kept made her worse. If you work with bad people, you may end up like them. Some people won't change unless life teaches them a lesson. Not everyone listens to advice. Sometimes, only serious consequences like prison or loss will make them see the truth. Thank you so much for watching this amazing story about Ifeyinwa and Ifatu on African Stories by V. If you liked it and felt inspired with their journey, please show your support by clicking the like button, sharing with your friends, and leaving a comment below. To see more interesting stories and learn about different cultures, subscribe to African Stories by V, and don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Your support means a lot and helps us bring more stories to you. Until we meet again, stay connected, stay inspired, and keep smiling.
I see your face in every dream, but your eyes don't smile at me. We came from the same small world, but you fly while I can't breathe. My sister, my shadow. Why do you hate me so? We shared a room, we shared a name, but your heart feels cold as stone. Well, sister, my shadow. Why do you hate me so? We shared a room, we shared a name, but your heart feels cold as stone. You said I took what's yours, but I never asked for more. I only wanted love and peace, not to be the one you were. Will we ever laugh again, or has the damage gone too far? I reach for you, but you pull away and leave me with the scar. My sister, my shadow. Why do you hate me so? We shared a room, we shared a name, but your heart feels cold as stone. My sister, my shadow. Why do you hate me so? We shared a room, we shared a name, but your heart feels cold as stone.